Greetings, adventurers, and welcome back to the Den of the Drake. Other dragons hoard gold, while I hoard internet cringe. Before we begin, I'll have to ask all my male viewers to step out for a second. I need to ask a question for all the ladies in the audience. They gone? Good. It's time for some girl talk. Girls, don't you just absolutely love when a guy chooses not to flirt with you, and instead chooses to immediately throw himself at your feet and treat you like some kind of divine being? Isn't being both obsessive and pathetic while simultaneously being insincere and slimy just the sexiest thing a guy could do? Yeah, I didn't think so. Alright boys, you can come back. We all know what a simp is, right? It's a guy who assigns way too much value to a particular woman who doesn't place any value on him. They're the kind of guy whose only hit of serotonin will come from sending KoyoteMoone $500 to say their name, only to get pissy when she doesn't show up at their front porch wearing a wedding veil and nothing else. I think that the reason that simp culture has roared to the forefront of internet disdain is because all the kids who grow up with characters like Mordecai, Finn, and Brock had subliminal messages imprinted on their developing brains that becoming obsessed and pathetic is the only way to a woman's heart, and now they finally have an adult paycheck to fund it. And it just so happens that simp culture has infected D&D as well. The story I have for you today stars a simp, whose obsession with another member of their D&D group knows no bounds, even if it means tanking the entire play session. Now, without any further delay, let's go ahead and dive right into the horrifying world of r/RPG-Horror-Stories. Enjoy. This week's story comes from Reddit user Grim_L. And is titled, "That Guy Destroys a Plot Because He Wanted to Play with His Crush." First time poster on this sub, sorry if the story is too wordy. I've been inspired by Den of the Drake and Crit Crab to make this story based on a that guy that our group played with. Names have been changed, of course. When talking about problem players, it's important to distinguish that a shitty player can be a good friend, and a good player can be a shitty friend. However, with Joseph, it was clear that he was both a bad player and a bad friend. I met Joseph on a Discord server running a homebrew setting with Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Most activities and games were small sessions connected by the same setting, and characters with different DMs. I had formed a small group of friends and we often hung around. One player in our group, Taylor, had joined at the same time as Joseph, and as such formed a sort of bond with him. When Joseph's character died, it created a shift in Taylor's character, and caused the start of a still ongoing character arc for Taylor, going for 2 or so years now. Joseph began to slowly hang around our group more often, something that we didn't mind at first. They talked about the game and showed interest in some things, but soon enough Joseph would start to show his first red flags. Though, in the moment we would take this as minor inconveniences or, oh, that's just Joseph, hahaha. He rarely played with us as a character after his first character's death, mostly sticking to being a DM on our server. Joseph dominated voice chats with talks about his other hobbies, his life, his thoughts on the game, his thoughts on the setting, and generally everything. If he thought it, he said it, and he let us know. We could get him to stop talking over others after a gentle reminder, yet this behavior was something he continued up until the last time I talked with him. If he wasn't talking over someone else, he would frequently complain about the system we used. He was a die-hard 3.5 edition fan and would constantly rules lawyer or argue the flaws of 5th edition. Now, I agree that the system has its flaws, but none of us seemed to care or agree with him, which made it all the more aggravating when we wanted to talk about something else, but he kept trying to talk about 3.5. Oh my god, so I'm gonna admit that I'm a bit of a boomer when it comes to adopting services like Discord, but when the pandemic happened, learning Discord kinda became non-negotiable, for anyone wanting to maintain a functioning D&D group, that is. And it continues to be a core part of the RPG community to this day. And one thing I learned real quick is just how annoying someone who cannot shut up can be in a Discord call. With Discord voice chat continuing to be a core part of the RPG hobby, there's a kind of etiquette that comes to playing online that I don't really see being talked about. So, me being me, I'm gonna take this time to complain about it. That cool? Okay, cool. So, unlike in an in-person conversation, communication can only happen when one person is talking at a time, which sounds like a good thing, until one person hogs the call and will not shut up about the most inconsequential shit. What was supposed to be a 3-hour D&D session quickly turns into a 3-hour session with a 2-hour startup time because someone just needed to give a full monologue about how their day went. Now, I know this might sound rude, but you gotta remember that Discord calls are kinda like a stage, where everyone takes turns being on the stage and in the audience. Whoever is talking is the only one who's talking. And everyone else is literally held hostage by a combination of one person's poor storytelling ability and the social pressure to avoid being rude. So you just end up sitting there, headphones in your ear, internally screaming to yourself, "Oh my god, I don't care. I wish I was doing literally anything else." So when I read about this little habit that our Simp-to-be has, I visibly cringed into my microphone. A majority of the time, this behavior isn't on purpose, mind you. Most of the time, it's just someone who's excited to be socializing and talking with people that they perceive to be their friends. So if you're on the receiving end of this, it's actually not that rude to give a polite reminder that, hey, I want to hear someone else's voice for a while. Yours is starting to give me a fucking aneurysm. Of course, you should phrase it more polite than that, but my default language is dickhead. In fact, I actually posted that as a little reminder at the very top of my Discord server available for Den of the Drake patrons. Hint, hint, give me your money, please. It's an irritating occurrence that can easily be avoided. Just remember, if you're sitting there thinking, my character and I have been talking for a while, you probably have. Anyway, unrelated tangent aside, let's get back to the story. There was also a player, Raven, who I had a crush on while Joseph also had a crush on her. It led to an awkward out-of-character situation with Joseph feeding me information that eventually led to the relationship between Raven and I dissolving. The messy drama eventually resolved into all of us deciding to remain mutual friends though, thankfully. Yet Joseph still exhibited simp-like behavior, and for a while the debacle was a sore spot for me. Raven seemed to take things in stride and tried not to make things awkward for us. There's a lot more I can say about Joseph. At times, he was a close friend and confidant. The next, he was running over to your crush to tell them that, "I'm so glad you two are in a relationship." Some notable moments include, he openly had NPCs flirt with player characters, despite the player's wishes or discomfort. His games had bizarre rulings that he listed in a Google Doc that he would edit mid-session to cement his authority as a DM and keep track of his rulings. Joseph coming into calls drunk and or high just to tell us just how much we meant to him, something that felt very contradictory to the other things he did while sober. He created a foil to my character by taking everything that made her a character and trying to invert it and only ending up being extremely inflammatory and offensive. He constantly explained out-of-character concepts to us, bringing the in-character action and intrigue to a grinding halt. Yet the situation I regaled today is perhaps the last straw many people in our friend group had with him. We were playing in a session set on a small magic island cursed by foreign magic that made our magic items stop working. It was a fun plot for intrigue, exploration, and roleplay. We had a few players who had originally come from this island and wanted to learn more about this land to break its curse and tame its wild, wacky magic. Raven was one of these players, and she had been very into the story that was presented as well as her character. But none of us ever got to resolve the plot after the stunt that Joseph pulled. Raven coordinated with the DM to run a session with the express purpose of exploring the history of this magical island. As Raven's character and ours were friendly, we lent our aid and we followed her on this expedition to discover more about her land's history. Her character was one of the few from this island. When Joseph heard that Raven was leading an expedition in character, Joseph made a character quickly before the session so that he could tag along with us and, more importantly, Raven. If we had any complaints with him joining, they did not matter. Joseph's character was a fighter or a wizard or something, I honestly can't remember, it's been like a year and a half, that was designed to be the Mandalorian. Yeah. In this roleplay and exploration-heavy session, he wanted to play a bounty hunter that was ripped from the screen of a TV show. The session went bad. Joseph constantly tried to wrestle control of the group from Raven, which led to her becoming noticeably stressed and irritated with him, which made him mope and pout since he had hurt her feelings. Raven would have been much more open to his suggestions for leading the party if he had understood why we were undertaking this adventure, and why we were following Raven's lead. In combat, he was very headstrong and pedantic on his turn. He tried to help us on our turns, and frequently tried to correct the DM on obscure rules regarding his homebrew monsters. During out-of-character planning and discussion, he constantly brought up Star Wars and his new character, which interrupted us and the DM. The final straw came with the temple. It was a small pyramid-like structure that we solved a small puzzle to get into. Inside was a square room with walls covered in engraved gold. The gold was engraved with the history and lore of the island, a solid clue and our first big lead on the history of the island. As we were exploring the room and a few smaller side rooms, Joseph was quiet. And then after a while of us role-playing and collecting artifacts for study, Joseph spoke up. Joseph: "So these walls are made of gold, right?" DM: "Yes. Finely engraved gold with the depictions of..." Joseph: "Well, I did the math. Based on the perimeter of the room, this gold should be more than enough for my character to retire. I want to start peeling the gold off the wall." We sat quiet for a moment as that sunk in. Joseph laughed at his declared action. Not malicious or creepy, but a laugh that implied that he thought this situation was humorous to him, as though he had just beaten the DM at his own game. Raven was the first to object, trying to explain how that absolutely defeated the point of the session and the point of the expedition. The other players tried to talk him down, stating that we would not take kindly to such an action against our in-character friend when it came to a stranger we just met moments ago. When all was said and done, the DM confirmed with Joseph that he still wanted to do this, which of course, he did. So the DM tried his best, asking Joseph to roll a stealth or sleight of hand check to start chipping off the gold. By the time one of us in character noticed this, he had already taken about a foot of the wall off. Our characters rightfully told him to stop and to get lost, that he was defacing an ancient site. He responded out of character by saying that this was the fastest way for his character to retire, and it's what Mando would do. He then acted surprised when we turned hostile, since we apparently didn't warn him that we were against this sabotaging action. We ended the session shortly after, and we left the VC with Joseph. It was wrong looking back to leave him alone and give him the cold shoulder. Yet at this moment, we all did not want to deal with his behavior. We never really figured out what exactly the monument was for or what the history of the island was. Enthusiasm for the plot died almost overnight. We kept some of the characters around and had a good time without Joseph's characters, and we still play together till this day. I apologize that this was really long, but the more I began to write, the more I began to remember little things that made Joseph so toxic. Thank you for reading. This post gave me a good bit of catharsis to write after so long. TLDR. Player hogs VC chats, simps after girl, and tries to insert themselves into a session being led by that girl, then gets the cold shoulder after they blatantly sabotage the plot. End of story. Why are you all so mad at me? All I did was invite myself to a session that was obviously important to you and took the opportunity to interrupt the session to talk about Star Wars and destroy the whole plot of your game just for the lulz. Anyway, Raven, do you want to get some coffee sometime? That's you. That's how dumb you sound. You're dumb. In case you haven't picked up on it by now, I hate having my time wasted when I'm trying to play a game. And yeah, I'm a bit of a hypocrite, because I'm often the one to derail the games I play in. But, I try my best to reel it back in when it begins to affect the enjoyment of everyone else at the table. D&D is a social game, but it often causes problems if you lean too much into the social or the game part. You gotta balance that shit. Basically, if you treat your online D&D group as if they are your hostages, well, be prepared for them to make some escape attempts. Speaking of having a captive audience, how about we take a look at this week's Gallery of the Drake? This week's fan art comes from viewer KoyoteMoone and depicts the Drake transformed into a much more marketable form. When you're as lazy as I am, world domination can't always be brute forced. Sometimes you gotta play the mental game. Oh, let's get that one. Well, yeah, there aren't any others to pick. Didn't this pet store used to have more dogs in it? Yeah, now that you mention it, and didn't it not used to be on fire? Will you two just adopt me already? You guys have a lot of unrealistic expectations for an economy this bad. But how does that explain the store being on fire? Look, I don't know. You two think I'm a dog and I'm not gonna take my precious time to explain supply and demand to idiots like you. Thank you again, KoyoteMoone, for submitting your art. If you'd like to see your fan art featured in Gallery of the Drake, be sure to send it to the email in my About section. Fan art is my favorite part of doing YouTube, and it means the world to me that I can inspire artists like you to create artwork like this. With the story over and artwork displayed, we're gonna go ahead and wrap up. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. And if you feel like supporting the channel further, my Patreon and merchandise links are in the description. I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope to see you next time in the Den of the Drake.